building only had 12 floors. I know that because I worked there for almost 3 years. There was no 13th floor. No button. No hallway. No office space. Nothing. So when the elevator display showed 13, I immediately knew something was wrong. And when the doors opened, someone stepped inside. This happened in 2022. At the time, I worked as an accountant in a downtown office building in Charlotte, North Carolina. The building wasn't especially tall, 12 floors total, a fairly ordinary corporate office tower. My company occupied the 9th floor. Most evenings I left around 6 p.m., sometimes later during busy periods. One Thursday night, I stayed much later than usual, nearly 11 p.m. By the time I finished, almost everyone had gone home. The office felt deserted. The hallways were silent. The atmosphere had that strange emptiness office buildings get after dark. I gathered my things and headed for the elevators. The elevator arrived immediately. I stepped inside, pressed the lobby button, and started scrolling through messages on my phone. The descent began normally. Floor 9, Floor 8, Floor 7. Everything seemed fine. Then the elevator stopped. The display showed 13. My stomach immediately tightened, because there was no floor 13. There couldn't be. I looked again. The number remained visible. Bright red. The doors slowly opened. Beyond them sat a hallway, dimly lit, silent, completely unfamiliar. My heart immediately started racing, because I had never seen that hallway before. Not once. The building directory didn't list it. The floor shouldn't have existed. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then somebody stepped into the elevator. A man, tall, middle-aged, dark gray suit, briefcase, completely ordinary, at least at first glance. The man entered calmly, pressed no buttons, then stood beside me, silent. The doors closed. The elevator resumed moving. I remember staring at the floor display, trying to convince myself I'd misread something. Maybe a malfunction, maybe a maintenance level, anything. Then I noticed something strange. The man wasn't looking at the display, wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't doing anything, just standing, completely still. The atmosphere inside the elevator felt wrong, heavy, uncomfortable. Then the man spoke. Without looking at me, without moving, he said, "You're working late." The statement immediately made me uncomfortable, because it sounded less like conversation and more like an observation. Still, I responded politely, something like, "Yeah, busy week." The man nodded, then said, "You usually leave earlier." My blood immediately ran cold, because that was true, very true, but I didn't recognize him, not at all. I had never seen him before. The elevator continued descending. The silence became unbearable. Then the man spoke again. "Floor 9 is quieter after 10. My stomach dropped, because again, he was right, and again, he shouldn't have known. The realization made me extremely uncomfortable. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. I stepped out immediately, relieved. The man remained inside, at least for a second. Then the doors closed. I remember turning around, expecting the elevator to continue somewhere. Instead, it remained on the lobby level. The display never changed. Several seconds later, curiosity got the better of me. I pressed the call button again. The elevator reopened almost immediately. Empty, completely empty. No man, no briefcase, nothing. The experience stayed with me, mostly because it made no sense. Still, I eventually convinced myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Until the following week, I mentioned the story to an older security guard. His reaction immediately caught my attention. Because he didn't laugh, didn't seem surprised. Instead he asked, "Gray suit?" My stomach tightened. I nodded. The guard became quiet, then told me something strange. Years earlier, a tenant from the building supposedly died after suffering a medical emergency inside one of the elevators. Late at night, after working overtime, the description matched. Gray suit, briefcase, middle-aged. The story sounded ridiculous. Honestly, I didn't believe it. Still, the coincidence bothered me. Then the guard shared one final detail. A detail I still think about. According to him, several employees over the years reported strange elevator stops. Stops on floors that didn't exist. And nearly every description involved the same man, the same gray suit, the same briefcase, the same observations, always knowing details about employees. always commenting on their routines, and always disappearing before anyone could identify him. I never saw him again. At least I don't think I did. But even now, years later, I still avoid using elevators alone when I work late. Because every time the doors open unexpectedly, part of me wonders whether somebody from a floor that doesn't exist is about to step inside. The elevator should have gone to the basement. That's where I sent it. That's where the call originated. And according to the control panel, that's exactly where it went. So why did it keep coming back? Every night. At the same time, opening its doors, waiting for someone, even though nobody was there. This happened in 2021. At the time, I worked overnight security at a large hospital outside Cleveland, Ohio. The hospital operated 24 hours a day. Doctors, nurses, patients, visitors. The building never truly slept. My responsibilities included monitoring several wings and responding to security calls throughout the property. Most nights were routine. Escort visitors, check emergency exits, monitor surveillance cameras. Nothing particularly exciting. The hospital had 6 elevators, 5 public elevators, 1 service elevator. The service elevator connected restricted sections of the building, including supply rooms, maintenance areas, and the basement. Normally, nobody paid attention to it, until Elevator 4 started acting strangely. The first incident happened around 2:17 a.m. A call appeared on the elevator control panel. Basement level. Someone had apparently requested the elevator. Nothing unusual. The elevator descended. The doors opened, then remained open for several seconds. According to the system, nobody entered. Nobody exited. Eventually the doors closed. The elevator returned to normal operation. Simple, at least initially. Then the exact same thing happened the next night. 2:17 a.m. Basement call. Doors open. Nobody there. The pattern repeated again. And again. And again. Always 2:17 a.m. Always the basement. Always empty. The consistency immediately caught my attention. Because random malfunctions don't usually happen on a schedule. Especially not that precisely. Eventually maintenance inspected the system. Sensors tested. Wiring checked. Everything appeared normal. No faults. No errors. No explanation. The incidents continued. Then things escalated. One night I happened to be near the basement when the call occurred. 2:17 a.m. Exactly. I decided to see it for myself. The elevator descended. The doors opened. The hallway beyond remained empty. Completely empty. No staff. No patients. Nobody. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then I noticed something strange. The elevator doors weren't closing. Normally, they remained open roughly 10 seconds. This time, they stayed open nearly 30. Almost like the system expected someone to enter. My stomach tightened slightly, because the behavior felt deliberate. Eventually, the doors closed. The elevator departed. The experience bothered me, more than it should have. Then another security officer shared something interesting. Several employees reported seeing the elevator open on empty floors late at night. Not once. Repeatedly. The report stretched back months. Nobody connected them at first, until the timing became obvious. 2:17 a.m. Every single incident. Management reviewed surveillance footage. And that's when things got weird, because cameras consistently showed the elevator opening. But occasionally, something appeared inside. Not clearly, just a silhouette, a dark shape near the rear wall, visible for only a moment, then gone. The footage wasn't good enough for identification. Still, it looked like someone, standing motionless, watching. The discovery triggered additional investigation. More cameras, more monitoring, everything. Then one night around 2:17 a.m., I witnessed something myself. The elevator arrived at the basement. The doors opened, and for a split second, I saw someone inside, a figure standing at the back, motionless, tall, dark clothing. My blood immediately ran cold, because the figure vanished the moment the doors fully opened. Not walked away, not stepped out, vanished. The elevator stood empty, completely empty. The experience genuinely shook me, because I knew what I'd seen, and yet it made no sense. The investigation intensified. Eventually, administrators reviewed historical records. That's when an unusual detail surfaced. Years earlier, A hospital employee suffered a fatal medical emergency inside elevator 4. The incident occurred during an overnight shift. The time recorded in the report, 2:17 a.m. The coincidence immediately spread throughout staff. Most dismissed it, rightfully so. Still, the timing felt unsettling. Then a maintenance supervisor made an important discovery. The elevator's internal clock occasionally stored incomplete trip data. Data that shouldn't have existed. Trips between floors that weren't requested. Trips recorded at times when the elevator sat empty. Many occurred around 2:17 a.m. The logs created more questions than answers. Eventually, administrators modernized portions of the system. Control equipment replaced. Monitoring upgraded. Afterward, the incidents mostly stopped. Mostly, but not entirely. Several months later, during one of my final overnight shifts, the elevator called again. 2:17 a.m. Exactly. I watched through surveillance cameras. The car descended. The doors opened. Nobody stood there. Nothing unusual appeared. Then just before the doors closed, something happened. The camera briefly captured a reflection. A reflection of a person standing inside the elevator, near the rear wall, motionless, watching the hallway. My blood immediately ran cold, because when I switched to the interior camera, the elevator was empty, completely empty. No person, no reflection source, nothing. The footage remained unexplained, at least officially. Years later, one detail still bothers me, because among maintenance records, investigators found notes from employees dating back nearly a decade. Multiple entries described the same thing, the same elevator, the same time, the same unexplained calls. Then one note stood out, written years before I ever worked there. The sentence read, "Elevator 4 waited again. Not malfunctioned. Not opened. Waited." The wording has always bothered me, because that's exactly what it felt like. Every night at 2:17, the doors would open, and remain open, as if someone was expected to step inside, as if someone arrived every night, and as if the elevator still hadn't realized they never would. I entered the elevator alone. I am absolutely certain of that. The lobby was empty. The hallway was empty. The elevator was empty. I checked. I looked directly inside before stepping in. Nobody was there, which is why I nearly screamed when I looked up halfway through the ride and realized a woman was standing in the back corner, watching me. This happened in November of 2022. At the time, I worked as a graphic designer for a marketing company in Atlanta, Georgia. Our office occupied the 12th floor of a 20-story building downtown. During normal business hours, the place felt busy and professional. After midnight, it felt completely different. The building became quiet, almost unnaturally quiet. Most floors were empty. The hallways echoed, and the elevators suddenly felt much larger than they did during the day. That particular night, I stayed late finishing a project. Very late, around 12:45 a.m. By then, everyone else had gone home, at least as far as I knew. I packed my laptop, turned off my office lights, and headed toward the elevator lobby. The floor appeared deserted. No voices, no movement, nothing. The elevator arrived almost immediately. The doors opened. The car was empty, completely empty. I know that because I looked directly inside before stepping in. A habit I'd developed after years of working late. Nobody, not a single person. I entered, pressed the lobby button, and looked down at my phone. The doors closed. The elevator began descending. Everything felt normal. For maybe 10 seconds. Then something made me look up. I still don't know what. Maybe a feeling. Maybe instinct. Maybe nothing at all. But when I lifted my eyes, my blood instantly turned to ice. Because a woman stood in the rear corner of the elevator, motionless, watching me. I froze immediately. The shock was overwhelming. Because she hadn't been there. I knew she hadn't been there. The elevator was empty when I entered. Yet somehow, there she was. A woman maybe in her 40s. Dark hair, gray coat, hands folded in front of her, standing perfectly still. The sight felt impossible. For several seconds, I couldn't even think. My brain kept trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe she'd entered at the last second. Maybe I somehow missed her. Maybe anything. Yet none of those explanations made sense. The elevator wasn't crowded. There was nowhere to hide. No blind spots. Nothing. Eventually, I forced myself to speak. Sorry. The word came out awkwardly, embarrassed, like I was apologizing for being startled. The woman didn't respond, didn't nod, didn't move, nothing. She simply stared. The silence immediately became uncomfortable, then unsettling, then terrifying, because normal people react. Normal people acknowledge each other. Normal people do something. She did nothing. The elevator continued descending. Floor 10, floor 9, floor 8. The woman never moved, never blinked, never changed expression. My heart pounded harder with every passing second. Eventually I glanced toward the floor indicator, and that's when things became much worse. Because the display showed, I stared at it, confused, then looked again. My stomach immediately dropped, because the building only had 20 floors. There was no floor 21. None. Yet somehow the elevator was moving upward. Not downward. Upward. The realization made my chest tighten. Because I had pressed lobby, the elevator should have been descending. Instead it was climbing, and the woman still stood motionless in the corner. Watching. The display changed again. Then 23. Then 24. Each number made less sense than the last. My hands started shaking. I immediately pressed the emergency button. Nothing happened. No alarm. No response. Nothing. The elevator continued climbing. The atmosphere inside felt wrong. Heavy. Almost oppressive. Like the air itself had changed. Then the woman finally spoke. The sudden sound nearly made me jump. Her voice was calm. Quiet. Almost conversational. And she said, "You weren't supposed to get on." My blood ran cold. For several seconds, I couldn't respond. The statement didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I remember asking, "What?" The woman tilted her head slightly, then repeated herself. "You weren't supposed to get on." The elevator suddenly stopped. Violently. The jolt nearly knocked me off balance. The display showed. The doors slowly opened. The space beyond looked wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. Not dark. Not abandoned. Wrong. A long hallway stretched into the distance. Poorly lit. Completely empty. The architecture didn't resemble anything inside our building. The sight made my stomach twist, because I knew, without question, that hallway wasn't part of the office tower. It couldn't be. The woman looked toward the open doors, then back at me. For the first time, her expression changed. She looked concerned, almost worried. Then she said, "Don't follow anyone." The statement barely registered, because at that exact moment, I saw movement in the hallway. Far away, a figure standing near the end. Watching, another figure appeared, then another, then another. My heart felt like it might stop, because all of them seemed to be looking directly toward the elevator. Toward us. The doors immediately began closing again. The moment they did, every figure started moving. Not running, walking, toward the elevator. Fast. Much faster than normal walking should have been possible. The doors slammed shut. The elevator immediately dropped. Not descended. Dropped. Like a cable had snapped. The sensation lasted only seconds. Then the elevator stopped abruptly. The display changed. Then 9. Then 8. Normal numbers. Normal floors. Everything suddenly felt normal again. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. I practically ran out. The relief lasted less than a second. Because when I turned around, the elevator was empty. Completely empty. The woman was gone. No movement. No sign she'd ever been there. Nothing. I reported the incident the next morning. Building management inspected the elevator. No faults. No errors. No unusual activity. The access logs showed only one passenger. Me. According to the system, I had ridden alone. The story should have ended there. But one detail still bothers me. Several weeks later, I spoke with a retired maintenance technician who'd worked in the building for decades. After hearing my story, he became unusually quiet. Then he asked, "Gray coat?" My stomach tightened immediately. I nodded. The technician looked away, then told me something strange. Years earlier, a woman matching that exact description reportedly died after an elevator malfunction during a renovation project. The incident occurred long before I worked there, long before many current employees worked there. Most people had forgotten about it, except apparently not everyone. Then the technician said something I'll never forget. He told me that every few years, somebody reports seeing a woman in a gray coat inside an elevator after midnight. Always alone. always silent, and always during rides where the elevator briefly stops on floors that don't exist. I don't know whether that's true. I don't know what happened that night. Maybe exhaustion, maybe stress, maybe something else. But I still remember the final thing she said. Because out of everything that happened, that's the part that frightens me most. Not the impossible floors, not the hallway, not the figures, just those 4 words. Don't follow anyone. Because I still don't know whether she was warning me about the people in that hallway, or warning me about herself.